I feel good about this one. Feel real good about this one. So, PlayStation finally had a state of play that didn't feel like damage control. It felt like, they actually gave us something to care about, something to look forward to for once. Wolverine looked vicious, violent, brutal. Onimusha looked sharp enough that I'm actually downloading that right now. The PlayStation screen not up. I'm playing that demo. God of War Laufey, a lot of people probably think it's going to be the biggest risk. I liked it. I enjoyed that 20 minutes of gameplay. Control Resonant might have been one of the smartest reveals because they've been talking about it for a while. Ace Combat 8, I've been an Ace Combat fan forever. Could be a sleeper. Dune Awakening has the world. They built it. Dune is a massive world. I love Dune. It's got a lot to prove. And then Until Dawn 2 has the hardest job, and out of this whole state of play, Until Dawn 2 has the hardest job because horror sequels don't survive on nostalgia. The only horror game to do that is really Silent Hill and Resident Evil. I'm not gonna go through every game, just the ones that stood out the most to me. There were some smaller games shown, and some of them did look interesting, but this, I just wanna keep it focused on the things that I know that I'm gonna play and what's on my radar. Again, Sony didn't need another safe presentation. I think what they needed was momentum, and they gave us really, really good momentum. I think the PS5, this console generation, has had a lot of big moments, but their rhythm hasn't really been consistent. It's felt real uneven. A showcase like this has to answer one good question for me. What makes PlayStation feel exciting right now? I have a PC behind me that I touch 10 times more than my PlayStation. So, for me, this state of play did give a good answer to that because the lineup had a lot of really good range, even with a lot of the smaller games that they showed. We got some good superhero action, samurai horror, flight combat, survival, psychological horror, the weird Remedy style games that only they can really pull off. I think that's what made this feel a lot stronger for me. But the games that were for me had a reason to exist and out of the whole shebang. Let's start with Wolverine. That's the obvious headline. And it needed to be. We've been waiting for this for years. So the main thing I wanted from Wolverine was that tone. I didn't want it to be Spider-Man but with claws. And it needed that aggression. It needed the violence to feel very personal, and boy, do they get up close and personal. From what they showed, it looks like Insomniac definitely understands that Logan Howlett, I bet y'all didn't know that was his name, is a different kind of superhero. He doesn't move like Peter Parker. He doesn't fight like Miles Morales. He's heavier. He's nastier. He's just harder to stop. And I think that's the appeal with a lot of Wolverine fans, is that we understand that. The yellow suit works in this game. I'm pretty sure they're going to give us a whole bunch of skins, but the yellow suit works in this game because it needs to have that comic book look, that comic book identity, but the combat has to be absolutely brutal, and they definitely brought the noise with that combat. My concern with it is simple. I don't want every encounter to feel overly polished and safe. Wolverine should absolutely feel dangerous. If the game makes him feel savage without turning everything into a clean superhero arena, this could be one of PlayStation's biggest wins. Just a real quick verdict. Wolverine stole the show because we finally got a look at the game, and it looks like a Wolverine game. It's not just another superhero project. Next up, we'll look at Onimusha, Way of the Sword. It might be the game I'm personally most curious about. I've always been a big Onimusha fan since the PlayStation 2. It's one of the games I'm most curious about. I don't know if I could say it's the most curious game for me, but that's why I'm downloading the demo right now while I record this. That matters because this is the type of game where a trailer was never going to be enough. You need to feel the sword. You need to feel the timing with every parry and every move. I need to feel the weight of the combat, and not even if it's just style. Onimusha is one of those games where you can feel what's actually happening in the battle. It has a very clear lane, samurai action, demon horror, sharp atmosphere. Capcom, I think, knew they didn't need to make this massive. They needed it to be focused, and that's exactly like it. This is a very cinematic type of game, and that's one of the strengths of this reveal. It doesn't need to look like it's trying to be everything. It looked like it understands the appeal. Just give me a strong sword system, give me aggressive enemies, give me atmosphere. Make me feel good mastering the combat of the game. And that's more than enough. A lot of the smaller games in the showcase may have had interesting art styles, concepts, but Onimusha is one of those that looks like it could actually, turn into a full gameplay review on this channel. I might even do one for the demo. Real quick verdict, it has the best revival potential. I think the demo is going to tell me more than the trailer could tell me. I'll let y'all know what's up with that. Let's get into God of War Laufey. God of War Laufey, to me, is the biggest risk in this show. Because, one, you got to follow Ragnarok. And that's one of my favorite games of this console generation. Like, that's why I have this freaking Mjolnir from the special edition. That game, I've ran that game twice. I've played the DLC for it. So, the idea is interesting, but the danger is pretty obvious. You can't make Faye feel like Kratos, because she's not Kratos. She kind of needs her own reason to lead a game. I feel like they did show a lot of that just from the beginning of the game. We don't really know too much about the story. I'm not gonna get into what I think it is, but she needs her own reason to lead a game. She needs her own combat language. She needs her own emotional weight, her own mythology. You don't want this to feel like a lore expansion. That'll make it feel thin. I think if Santa Monica Studios uses Faye to show a different kind of power in the God of War universe, it could work. And from what now we've got magic. Kratos didn't have magic. Kratos was pure brute force. So now we're getting that magic, and I think that's very important. The question is, like, how does she fight? What makes her so dangerous? That sword gameplay was insane. I enjoyed it, watching it. And I was in my car on my way home from work watching it. But it's like, why does this story need to exist? I feel like God of War as a whole is too important for a spin-off that just feels like filler. It's like that side-scrolling game that just came out that I played all of like 10 minutes of and was like, all right, this is boring, get out of here. I don't care about that story. We already know what happens to Kratos' brother, Deimos. We already know what happens to him. I think if they're doing this, they got to do it right, and it needs to feel essential to the story. Real quick verdict. It's got a high ceiling. It just needs a lot more gameplay proof, and the concept can really only be strong if Faye feels like a real lead in the story. Moving along to Ace Combat 8. I didn't think Ace Combat 8 was gonna dominate the conversation like Wolverine, but longtime PlayStation fans, I know I got a couple buddies in my Discord that are, when they finally see the gameplay, they're gonna go crazy for it. I would, if they add the capabilities, if they add the compatibility for a plane cockpit rig, I will buy one to play Ace Combat. I 100% would do that. It's a franchise that has a clean identity. It's fast jets. It always has some of like the best music I've ever heard in games. You got the missile locks. It's military drama. It's very, very anime-esque with the cinematics and the way the story goes. Got ridiculous stakes. It's arcade flight combat with enough seriousness to make it intense. For this channel, it's very, very close to the racing lane. It's got that speed, it's got that precision, it's got the reaction time, the hardware even, assuming they add the capabilities, the compatibility, and it's got spectacle. Every dogfight that you get in that game feels very rewarding in that series. That makes it very useful for gameplay content in that sense. It also gives me something outside of racing that still fits this channel's performance angle. If the campaign has like a lot of really big pieces, the controls feel sharp. Ace Combat 8 could 100% be a sleeper game. You know, not every game has to be a brand pillar. Some games are valuable because they create clean, exciting footage. You know, and Ace Combat is one of those games that does that naturally for me. So, quick verdict. It might not be the biggest reveal, but it definitely is one of the cleanest gameplay opportunities out of the whole show. Going into Dune Awakening. So, Dune Awakening has the world that's not even a question. You know, Arrakis is already built for a survival gameplay. I've been waiting for them to do a Dune video game since they rebooted the series with the movies. You know, it's got heat. Arrakis specifically, it's got the heat, it's got the scarcity, sandworms, spice, which could be very, very, very fun. It's got the factions, the politics, paranoia. All of that fits into a survival game, survival RPG game. The question is, how do they loop it together? Survival games don't succeed because of a good map. I think they really have to give the player a reason to come back and keep playing it. You know, progression has to be big, especially with as much stuff as you can actually do, as much as what they do in the Dune universe. The factions have to matter. Building, assuming you can do that, building stuff has to matter. Like, it has to stay dangerous after the first couple hours and to be engaging. And that's where Dune Awakening has to prove itself to me. A strong license gets people in the door, and Dune actually has a lot more fans than I would imagine. I thought it was just me, you know, for a while. But a strong system is what will keep everybody playing that game. And if the PS5 version runs as well as it looked during the show, you know, the end game has purpose. This could be a lot bigger than people expect it to be. But if it turns into another survival grind, loot chasing, you know, kind of thing with a famous name attached to it, I'll probably get rid of it quick. So, quick verdict, and this is probably gonna be the quickest verdict out of this whole video. The world is elite. It's the gameplay loop that'll decide everything for me. Moving into Control Resonant. So, Control Resonant might be the most creatively interesting game to me, almost as interesting as Romeo is a Dead Man. I don't know if y'all played that. It was pretty good. It kind of gave me those vibes of that game, and that's a lane that Remedy, you know, they own that. That's nobody. I don't think anybody else can make a game as good as the first Control. So Control Resonant, I think, like, it's gonna work in a very specific way that feels almost wrong. You know, the Bureau felt dangerous. You know, the objectives felt alive. The environment felt alive. Everything felt really unstable and very uncomfortable, and that's what made it such a good game. So I kind of want a lot of the same for Control Resonant. I want the sequel to feel, you know, stranger, darker, more unstable if possible. You know, if the main character is really central to this one, I think that changes the emotional center, because in the first Control game, the main character was very, like, you could, I don't want to say empathize, but you could really feel what they were going through and what they were looking for, what they were searching for, what they were trying to achieve at the end of it. You know, she was just really just trying to understand the Bureau at the end of the day. But, you know, I think this character should feel like, when I think of the word resonant, I think they have to put a story together that resonates with the first one. It should give you that same exact feel, you know, and I think that'll immediately give this sequel a lot of tension. So this might not be the loudest game from the show, but I think it could end up being one of the smartest. Real quick verdict, this is the game I'm watching for the story. I'm watching for a lot of the atmosphere and definitely the weirdness. And going into Until Dawn 2. So for me, I think Until Dawn 2 has the hardest job. That's going up against, they did actually reveal another Silent Hill game. So it's going up against that. It's going up against Resident Evil 9. It's a genre that is really, really hard to get players to come back when you make a sequel. The first Until Dawn worked. It felt like a fresh structure. You know, it was just a group of characters and a horror setup. A lot of bad decisions, branching consequences. You know, that worked once. The sequel, I think, has to do more. It needs a stronger hook, better consequence system, which they showed a little bit of, and I got hype when I saw that the scene with the decision and the guy falls onto the rocks, and it was crazy. I enjoyed that a lot. I feel like it's and from what I saw, the cast is a lot of actors in it, real life actors in it that I think have that ability to make people actually care. So the choices have to feel like they reshape the story depending on what you decide to do. The danger is nostalgia, because Until Dawn, the first one, it's one of those nostalgia factors. So want them to feed off of too much of that nostalgia. I want this one to feel new, feel fresh, feel like a new experience. And quick verdict, it's a very strong brand, but the sequel needs better consequences to justify itself. So there were a lot of smaller games in the showcase that looked interesting. They just weren't the focus of this review. A lot of really cool art, strong indie mid-budget releases. Some most likely will end up being a lot better than expected. But for this video specifically, I wanted to do it based off of what I actually wanted to play, which was Wolverine, Onimusha, God of War, Ace Combat, Dune, Control, and Until Dawn. That's the lanes that I really care about. You know, big gameplay hooks, strong worlds, systems worth testing, stories worth reacting to, you know, the games that I can actually turn into content. So this is where I'm at after State of Play. The most exciting was Wolverine. Best revival potential, Onimusha. Biggest risk, God of War Laufey. Best gameplay sleeper, Ace Combat 8. Biggest systems question, Dune Awakening. Most creative, Control Resonant. And most approved, Until Dawn 2. I think this State of Play worked because it didn't really only rely on one game. They did a lot of really, really good reveals. I just think the games that I focused on are the ones that gave the show enough range to feel like PlayStation actually has movement. They have momentum going into 2027, something to look forward to. You know, that's exactly what I wanted, not just some announcements. You know, like real momentum is what I was looking for. So the real question is which of these games will actually land when they drop. And honestly, since the Onimusha demo is downloading right now, I'll be testing that. So we'll get a little taste of what it has to offer. If you want the demo impressions, I'll probably have those next. Wolverine stole the show for me. I just feel like Onimusha is one of those ones that'll tell me the most when I actually have the controller in my hand. So I'm actually really glad that they're giving us the opportunity to try it out. This has been Mac Benjamin TV. I'm out.